all the properties, they have a potential. So it might be the building for you, but they all have a potential. And do you want to dig in or not?
Hello, and welcome to this week's episode of the Real Estate Investors Club podcast. I'm here with actually I would say a friend of mine and a colleague who I've been working with for a while, Ralph. And I'm going to let you say your own last name, Ralph. What's your last name, Ralph?
Karazivan.
There we go, because I always massacre it. From the firm Inspexia. So Ralph is a founding father of the firm Inspexia. He's a building inspector, which you can tell from the name of his company. And what's on the agenda today is we're going to go back and forth a little bit about a recent inspection that we did on a property that I'm acquiring. So Ralph is going to tell you a little bit about his findings. I'm going to tell you then, and we're going to go back and forth a little bit about, what I'm going to do with some of the stuff, how seriously I take certain things, how I filter the information Ralph gives me. But maybe by way of introduction, Ralph, you can just tell our audience really quick who you are and how you got to be on the show with me having this conversation about building inspections.
Sure. So I started the building inspection profession in 2011, and basically I did over 4,000 inspections in total. Today now I train inspectors that wish to join the AIBQ. That's the Quebec Association of Building Inspectors. And lately I've been concentrating in forensic type of inspection. So thermal imaging camera, blower door, to find deeper issues, to find the source and the core of the issue. So it could be about a problem related to a hidden flaw, for instance, water infiltration. So it's my field, and I love it. And we met, Terrie, maybe more than that.
More than that. It's been 10 years,
10
Ralph.
years.
Yeah.
Okay. Was my second inspection. No, just kidding. Yeah. So time flies, huh?
Time does fly. All right. So we're here today to talk about a recent purchase, which I'm looking at a rental sixplex that construction mid 60s, Montreal North. And we did the inspection, I guess, about a month ago now. So why don't you just sort of go over your findings, maybe pull out 3 to 5 major points or bobos that you wanted me to pay attention to when we did our walkthrough.
Sure. So the first issues that we noted was the brick repairs that were done. Basically, we were able to see some bulging area and poor repair. So the poor repair is really easy to notice. You'll see that oftentimes the mortar is a different color, is darker, more solid, and it chips away. It crumbles. You're able to see really clearly that the mortar doesn't support properly the bricks, and oftentimes this you'll see within few years. So it's we noted this. There's this point. So the issue about this is we don't know how well it was done. So normally, if you see a bulging area, so that means the bricks are not supported anymore properly. What's holding together the portion of the wall is only the joints, the mortar joints. So the fasteners in the back are corroded or are missing at that point, too badly corroded. So the mason has to remove the bricks, not only do the repointing, as we call it, changing the mortar joints to have another mortar, a more recent mortar. That he has to disassemble the bricks. It's a costlier job than only doing the mortar joints. So you don't know how many years this will sustain.
Hmm.
Will be
Hmm.
in good shape. So this was the first thing that I noted.
So let me just, before we move on, because I think
Yeah.
this is like a super, super important point that people who are acquiring rental properties that have been rental properties for a long time and where there's been this situation of deferred maintenance, like one of the most common, this is one of the most common issues we see. Why? Because brickwork is extremely expensive, and because it's the kind of thing that, like, first of all, there's a lot of crooked masons out there, but it's also the kind of thing that, like, you can ignore for a while and your tenants are not going to call you about. And so the thing to kind of the warning signs, like Ralph mentioned, discoloration of joints, looking like things are sort of coming apart. I would say when you're looking for like those brick bulges, the thing to understand, and this for me was a huge learning curve, is to understand the way those brick walls are built. So, like, our houses are not actually made of bricks. Our houses are made of wood framing, and the brick is tacked on outside with metal anchors. And so the anchors are encrusted in the mortar. And in that way, the wall is kind of tacked, the brick wall is tacked to the wood wall. And so what happens is over time, water gets in behind, the metal anchors get eroded, and then the bricks begin to sag away from the actual structure of the house. And this is, I guess, what's, Ralph is referring to, is that we could notice on this property that, especially at the top of the walls, it looked like the top third of the wall had been repointed, so there's new joints, but the sag is still there. So what that means is that either the owner was trying to save money, or else the mason was crooked and they repointed, but they did not dismantle the wall, put new anchors, and build the wall up again. And people don't do that because it's expensive, or because the mason sold them a half solution and the owner did not understand the construction of a brick wall enough to know what they were paying for. And at the beginning of my career, I got caught out with this actually on a couple of buildings where a mason sold me a repointing job without dismantling the wall, and so it was basically a waste of money because he didn't fix the real problem. So yeah.
It's actually not the mason that's gonna fix the issue. Well, the source. I mean, so the source is because most buildings, uh, apartment building, they don't have a roof overhang. So typically they will have a roof overhang on the frontage. So this is where most of the time the brick walls looks the nicest because you have a protection. However, on the left, right, and in the back, so on the other facades, basically you don't have a roof overhang, and most of the time the piece of metal overlapping the top section of the wall, after a certain time, it doesn't the flashing that we call is going to get loose with sometimes, so water is able to get behind the wall, the brick wall, and the faster this is after maybe 50 some years, then it's going to corrode. So the source really is from the roof, is coming from the roof detail, the flashing. And there are some ways to prevent these issues to happen. You could always ask the roofer to install a wood strip, so from the brick, the brick wall to the piece of metal, so at least you'll have a clearance, so the water won't go on the brick wall as much. So there's going to be a drip edge flashing that we call. So basically, the water drips further away from the bricks.
Hmm.
So, and you could see like in Saint Léonard, Anjou, there's a lot of corniche, so roof
Hmm.
overhang that's going to protect the bricks. And most of the time, these walls are well protected. You also have, depending on the quality of the mason. If you go to the masonry, I mean, if you go in Verdun, you could see these areas. Most of the time, people were building the bricks their own, and um, there's a lot of porous bricks on the right rear facades. On the frontages, most of the time it's going to be a nicer brick, more solid brick, but on the rest it's going to be a weaker brick most of the time.
Mhm. Let's just I wanna bring up one more thing, and then we'll move away from the bricks because we
Yeah.
have a couple of other issues to cover. But one of the other things is around the windows, right? Because you mentioned that water can infiltrate, from the roof joints. So if your ceiling on the roof is not done properly, you can have water getting behind the brick wall. The other thing is if your windows are not caulked properly, or if you have a lot of temperature variations, you often see cracking joints or missing mortar below the windows if you have not caulked your windows and doors properly. Or also around the bottom of balconies, like that's another place where wherever water can get behind the bricks, that's where you can have the anchors begin to erode. And I think on this property we had some problems with that as well. Like there were kind of these aureoli of damaged bricks underneath the windows.
Yeah, and these are pretty costly, fixes.
Yeah, which is why a lot of owners defer that and
Yeah,
don't do it. And when they see that it's time to redo the masonry, they're like, okay, let me sell the building.
and
um, yeah. So tell us about the next bobo.
the next thing, well, it was an older building. Was it in the 60s?
60s, yeah,
Yeah,
mid 60s.
mid 60s. So we saw several cracks, but we have to question ourselves depending on the size of the crack. If it goes along on the brick wall as well, so it expands all the way up, but there were no way to tell if it was going on the bricks because the masonry was redone. However, I was able to see a shifting. So basically, the bricks weren't at the same height. So this is a sign that at some point there was a sediment of the foundation. So you have to ask yourself how deep is it? It wasn't a uh, big difference, big gap between the other bricks. However, it was mentioned in the report, and it's always a question mark. What's going to happen in the few years? If the brick was repointed 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that's a good indication that it's pretty stable. However, if it was recently done, uh, we don't know. But uh, this building in particular, it wasn't a big crack on the foundation. However, we saw the shifting of the bricks,
Hmm.
um, and we saw them also from the garage. So this is where we found cracks in the garage. It's always something that's going to be pointed out, and some people get scared of foundation crack. You always have to question yourself. So basically, it's you have to question the client. You have to be more alert to the wall finishes inside of the building, the flooring. If you see, an important clearance between the walls, the ceilings, diagonal cracks, stuff like that we look at carefully, very carefully when we see these type of cracks. And you have also to question yourself: is the area more prone to have sediment, soil issues? I had a client. She Before doing the inspection, she told me that a friend of hers live in the same street, and she has issue. She has to pier the foundation. So I went there. It was clearly visible there was an issue. I made a call an engineer. The engineer said basically the same thing as that I did. That I did tell her is basically we cannot tell you if it's gonna move or shift again in the future years, in 5 years, in 10 years. No one could tell you this. This is why so many peering company making a fortune, right? Because a lot of people want to, they want the ultimate solution. I have this issue. I don't want any issues in the future. What could I do? Well, you could only want to stabilize the foundation, and these are expensive work. But I don't believe in that solution being the best because it's so expensive. You could do other things. You could look at the grading of the soil. So if you have negative slopes, so all the water directs into the foundation walls. So you have more chances of having issues like that. If you have asphalt all the way against the foundation, this also doesn't help because all the soil dries up. You don't have a lot of water. So having too much water is an issue. Not enough water is an issue as well. If you have a big large tree plus asphalt, so a lot of issues, uh, you know, that could cause sediment of the foundation.
So let's just unpack that a little bit, because I think there's if we're thinking that this podcast is aimed for investors who actually want to do deals,
Yeah,
um, want to avoid bad things, but are maybe willing to take on some kind of stuff that might scare people. And I sort of put myself into that category. Like, I don't want to have to pile a building. That's not something that I'm interested in. That's not where, I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to manage that construction project. So I'm not afraid of a few foundation cracks that are not scary. But I think, in your initial comments, one of the things that you pulled out is, when is a foundation crack scary? And I think one of the things that you can do to assess that is to see how far up and how far in does it go. So, you mentioned the brick. If the brick has been repointed not too long ago, or if it's been repointed a while ago and the crack doesn't follow all the way up into the brickwork, it means that there's a settling in the foundation, but there's not been a huge movement. So it's, how far does the crack go up? Obviously the size, like the dimension, how wide is the crack? And then what do you see on the inside of the building? And I think what reassured us in this case, I think there were a few factors. So the first one was, it didn't go all the way up the brick. On the inside the units, we saw pretty much no settling whatsoever, even though the units had not been touched in quite a while. So there was no cracked plaster. I even think that side of the foundation went into the garage. So even if there were to be a little bit of water infiltration, it's not like it's going into an apartment where it's going to create rot behind a wall that I can't see. So if the crack were ever to make it onto the inside of the foundation, I would see it. And if there's infiltration there, it's not the worst thing in the world if it's in the garage, right? So what I pulled out of that is, I just need to get a company to come inject the foundation crack to make sure that the infiltration stops there, and then move on to the next thing.
exactly. And you know what? Foundation walls built in the 60s and up, they were more solid. They were more solid. There were protocols before until the 50s. There was a lot of aggregate, so it's very more porous foundation. So more chances of having issues at that point. So you have to be careful. So like I said, the year of construction, um, how bad is it? You have to look at signs.
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
it's really more a science than anything. You have
Yeah.
to question the owners. I question everybody when I'm doing the inspection.
Yeah.
I question the tenants. Were there any repairs? When was the last time the walls were painted? When was the walls, the ceiling touched, or the floors, so on and so on. So it's a thing that scares people. So yeah, you have to question yourself more than
Yeah.
anything.
And
Um,
let me just one more point also, you think you mentioned also the part of the city, right? And I think that's super important, because anybody who's looking at, in Montreal, we talk about the plateau, you have, Hochelaga that's built on clay, you have different parts of the west of the island, Lachine, Verdun, LaSalle, where there's some very humid ground. There's even underground rivers or something, which is the case with my principal residence, right? We have a whole lot of water in the soil. So it really, knowing a little bit, what kind of area you're in will also help you evaluate, the gravity of some of the signs you see. And, someone like Ralph is going to be able to help point that out, because they've just seen so many of these things. They're just aware of, the parts of the city where those things are a risk. So foundation crack in this case didn't scare me away. What was the next bobo?
Next, nothing scares you.
Oh, that's not true. No, that's not true.
Except birds.
If Should we talk about the birds, Ralph? Let's talk about the birds. Have you really been listening to the episode, or has your monkey mind been taking you off in one direction or another? Our mental habits can be our biggest assets or our biggest liabilities as we pursue certain goals.
For me, the biggest performance gains have always come from training my mind. In my book, Mindful Landlord, I talk about how you can train your mind and how you can apply some of these strategies to your journey in the real estate field. The book is available on Amazon and also on its website, mindfullandlord.com. Now I'll stop evangelizing for the power of mental training and let you get back to the show.
So I actually want to call this property the birdhouse because this is like right in my court with the management issues. One of the units, we went in there and like, there's a lot of birds in here. So it's a 2-bedroom place, and the tenant,
We were told that she had birds, but
she had birds, but like being told someone has birds and then you go into the unit and it's a
yeah,
2-bedroom and the birds are stacked 3 cages, one on top of the other, lining the entire apartment. Like there must be 150 birds in the units, all
yeah,
chirping, all
crazy,
pooping.
crazy. Don't disturb my birds.
Don't disturb my birds. So that's going to be
I couldn't use
one
my
of
flashlight.
that's she couldn't use the flashlight because
You
you had
know,
to not scare the birds. But so
that
that's
was
going to be, item number 1 on my management list of what I'm going to attack right after going to the notary, the birdhouse. But let's get back to building inspection because
so.
that's the manager's walkthrough. The manager's walkthrough is like, all right, birds, like what city inspector am I calling for this?
So there's security issues like the walkways, the porch and the frontage. These are, they're pretty costly issues, and you don't want to call from a tenant saying, I tripped this winter. So plus it was going towards the retaining wall, where the garage was. So these were considerable issues that you had to deal with, and as soon as possible. Basically, when you have these issues, it's a liability issue. There was this. There were also the the retaining walls in the back. So there were basically, I think, 2 apartments in the basement. They had rear access, so you had a retaining wall, and you had the concrete slab, and it was all cracked. The retaining wall was leaning. Uh, so this is a big issue, right? Because you're dealing with concrete, so you have to remove the slab, pour another slab, remove the retaining wall. So these, you're preventing like access from the back to the tenants. So it's all issues that were pointed out.
Now, when I see this, so of the things that we've mentioned so far in this interview, obviously, Ralph, after the inspection, I called my mason who came and had a look at the brickwork that you pointed out. In this specific case, he was
Yeah.
like, Terry, leave it for another 5 years.
Yeah.
It's not a big deal. So my
It-
mate, when my mason says that, I actually believe him because I know he wants the contract. He wants to make money. He's like this. Okay, yes, the job could have been better done. Yes, the mason cut corners and didn't pull down the wall, but like it can stay like that.
oh, for sure.
Now, of the issues that you mentioned, this business of the retaining walls, the cracked concrete, um, that is something that in my opinion it needs to be addressed. And if I look at the, kind of bigger ticket items potentially, like that's going to be minimum a 30 to 40K job to
Oh, yeah.
reduce some of that concrete and rethink it to get. So what you want to think about is you want to get the slopes going away from the foundation so that you don't worsen foundation cracks, that you make sure the water is going away. The tenant liability issues, like, somebody twisting their ankle on the walkway because one of the interlocking tiles is in the wrong place, the chance that that comes back to bite you is relatively minor.
Mhm.
But that being said, if you have any kind of code violations where which there was an issue with this, that there was like an access into the back of the of the building and some window wells that were like kind of a risk for somebody maybe putting their foot into them. And so like those kind of safety issues are the sort of things that need to be rectified so that you don't have some kind of a liability issue. And there was even actually an insurance issue on the building that at one end the building did not pass a specific insurance inspection because one of the window wells, the insurer believed that it was in the footpath, and so somebody could just put their foot into it, and they were concerned about that safety. So in that case, one would have to put in a guardrail, or do something to just clean that issue up.
Well, for sure, if you have to look also. It wasn't a busy street. If it was a commercial building and it was on a boulevard, you would get a fine.
Yeah, but
Yeah,
I mean, the
yeah,
chances
but
of that here
yeah,
are
exactly. It's a
minor.
residential
Yeah.
property, and
So, Ralph, I think we have time for, like, unless you have some concluding words on this, I think we have time for one more thing.
one more
Should we
thing.
talk? Should we talk about the technical space, like what potential
Yeah,
pyrite, or like the cracks in the slab, or what should we
yeah,
talk
sure.
about?
Well, the building, like we said before, in the 60s, the slab wasn't in good shape. There was many cracks. It was settled, all around the pit, the drain pit. When we see cracks like that, converging cracks that we call, so many cracks meeting one in another, each other. So basically, it tells you that it heaves or it settled down. But most of the time, when we see a heaving slab, we will call this and say there might be a risk for pyrite. So it's an older building. Normally there is some research about that after 30-40 years the backfill settles, it becomes stable. However, the slab wasn't in a good shape, so even if it's stable, well, there's some work to be done. And also the drains under that slab, they were old. So if the crack settled and the cast iron pipes are right under the slab, well, there's chances of having issues. We saw staining, so stains around the pit, and on the drains as well. So these are good things to fix, because it's a 7-year-old property. At a certain point, the cast iron, it, it cracks at the bottom of the drain, and oftentimes you won't see that there's an issue because all the dirt collects and obstruct the crack. But after a certain time, this doesn't stay like this forever, and you have to change it. So I told you to have a budget to replace these drains, at the same time fix replace maybe
Mhm.
the slab, because it's in this area.
So yeah, so let's just unpack that a little bit, because I think, like, for you, who always has your head into these kind of issues, we know
Yeah,
exactly what you're talking about. But I think for some of our listeners might not be as experienced as we are. So when he's talking about the drain, he's talking about
the sanitary drain, so the
the
drain
so like
connected to.
the main 4-inch pipe that collects either the rainwater or the sanitary water that goes out of the building. And so the typical pattern you see in these older properties is that they will have changed the sections that were easy to get to. So often up into the units, that cast iron pipe that's over 50 years old has cracked, and so they'll have replaced some of it, or they'll have replaced the parts that go into the kitchen because they had access to that. The part that people don't replace, like you said, is the part that goes into the foundation slab, or the slab of the in this case the garage, because that involves you breaking the concrete, which is expensive, and then going underneath to address a problem that's kind of buried, really.
Mm,
And so this is like a very typical deferred maintenance thing when you see like a cast iron pipe that's corroded, it's rusted, and it goes down underneath a cracked slab in a garage or in a basement somewhere. That's like a typical call that you might have some plumbing problems underneath the floor like that you're going to need to address. You're going to need to get the jackhammer in, open it up, lay some new piping, probably also put in a backwater valve, because I just got off the phone with the insurance this morning. They were asking me if I have a backwater valve. I actually went into your report, Ralph, to see if there was one. I don't think there was.
there was one.
There was one?
Yeah.
Oh, I got to call my insurer back. um, so that's it. So, and then that becomes an
But
opportunity for you
only
to,
for that drain, though. You
only
know,
for that drain.
in the pit in the garage.
And just to also close the loop on the whole the pyrite thing. So that actually really scared me because so just for our listeners who don't fully understand pyrite, it's that some of the backfill that was used or some of the concrete that was used before had these particles, pyrite particles in them that as the foundation cracks with time, water infiltrates and then you get cracking because it basically means that the concrete that was used wasn't super stable. And so what was explained to me after this, when I was like, I was almost going to not buy the building because I was afraid of pyrite and I wanted to get a pyrite test and the sellers refused.
Oh.
Um, and then it was actually my broker who kind of talked me out of it and was like, Terry, like there's no pyrite in the foundation, right? Like in the foundation itself, we're talking about the slab that was poured underneath the garage. And so the slab's in bad shape. The foundation's just fine, aside from the one crack that we mentioned. And so
Mhm.
the risk of what the downside of a problem there would be is that you're going to have a floor of your garage that's cracking. It's already cracked, so it's not going to get much worse than it is. And when I have to redo the drainage, if it's confirmed that it's pyrite and I want to do something about it, I can pull out some of the backfill, redo it, and then put a slab of concrete back on top of it. But I mean, that's also it's not like it's gonna destabilize my building. It's just gonna make it that
Oh.
my garage floor is in less good shape than it should be.
Yeah, exactly. Honestly, pirate issues, in very rare occasions, it goes on and disturb the foundation itself of the building. It's mostly an aesthetic issue. Yeah, but it's something that you have to declare. That's the only thing,
Mhm.
right?
And I learned actually in this transaction, I learned that it's not something to be extremely afraid of because I think in like, I do also have a broker's license and in my work as a broker, like, you're talking about mostly single family homes, like in the South
Mm.
Shore or Laval or something. And everyone's like, oh, pyrite, like end of the world. It's like asbestos. It means we're going to have to do like some kind of a crazy job to get rid of it. But I discovered in this transaction that like, what's the worst downside, especially when it's like, the slab of your garage, like, ah,
I saw a building, a 2014 building in Konjac that had pyrite, like recently.
yeah.
2014
Wow.
still has pyrite. Yeah,
Yeah. Well,
imagine.
that's like we're not even going to get into the whole because there's then in Trois Rivières, for example, which is the other market I invest in. There's the whole pyrotite thing, and that's
Yeah.
actually really quite serious. But like, let's leave that for that discussion for another time. So I don't know if there's some way we can sort of conclude this. I mean, Ralph, like whenever we finish an inspection together, like there's always this like funny moment when I'm like, Ralph, should I buy this building? So what's your answer?
Oh well, listen. uh, you're an investor. That's something else, right? You have to look at the how much the building gives you at the end, the cash flow, if there's any, the future value. But if it's a residential property, it's something else. People are, they put their heart into it. They're gonna live in the property. They if there's some work to be done, they'll be right there in the in the mess. But for an investment property, I all the buildings that I do, when it's an investor, when I see they're scared, well, I'll tell them, get somebody, get a quote, uh, try to discuss about the finding with the seller. Everything is all the properties, they have a potential. So it might be the building for you, but they all have a potential. And do you want to dig in or not? Right?
Is it a good investment to dig in, right? Because,
Exactly.
that's especially like we're talking about, like investing in Montreal, right? Like some of the sub-markets around Montreal, there's more recent constructions, there's maybe less deferred maintenance, but like if you're investing in Montreal and you're looking to find good deals, the name of that game is deferred maintenance. And it's because the owners have been milking those properties for the last 30, 40, 50 years
Mhm.
without investing what they would need to invest to bring the building systems up to, something stable or something beautiful or where it should be. And so as you're going through, you're trying to assess, what maintenance do I need to do? What has come to the end of its life? What can live another 5 years? And so, like, I mean, I think this is also another good rule of thumb, right? Like, when we get done with an inspection, what I want to know is, I'm signing a mortgage term for 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, and I want to know I don't think any further than that. And I think in the next 5 years of ownership, if I'm signing a mortgage for 5 years, what am I going to have to do? And that then becomes part of my budgeting, part of my negotiation. What's beyond that term is another decision, because once my mortgage comes up for renewal, I'm going to sit down, look at the state of the building, what it's worth, and be like, okay, am I going to extend my mortgage, or is this the time for me to liquidate and get out? So it's also, a question of evaluating what expenses am I going to have to incur, and what is the duration of life of this particular system, and when am I going to have to inject capital to bring it up to speed.
So, yeah, well, in the building that we did, it's mostly the retaining wall, right, in the
Yeah.
back, and
Yeah.
so you focus on that problem, and you negotiate it.
And then buy the building and ride it.
That's it.
Okay, well, Ralph, I want to thank you for spending this time with me, taking the time to go through some of this stuff with our audience. I think, again, in this climate of deferred maintenance in Montreal, like the issues that we talked about today, I think on every single inspection, with the exception of maybe the landscaping, these things come up on every single inspection. There's always brick, there's always plumbing, sometimes there's roofing, there's always balconies, there's always slopes. So, once you learn how to assess that, and have a language that you can work with your inspector on those issues, you're going to get an appreciation. Oh, the foundation cracks as well. Like, there's always foundation cracks. So, like, are they scary cracks or are they not scary cracks? These are, I think, some of the main issues that come up again. So I want to thank you for sharing that knowledge with our audience. What's the best way for people to reach out to you if they want to learn more, if they want to hire you as their building inspector or someone from your team?
Well, it's a website, inspexia.com, or the office number 514-944-7253.
So we'll be
Please call
sure
Terrie.
we'll be sure to drop that in the show notes after. Ralph also has an Instagram page. I know he tries to post a bunch of videos of some of the funny, scary, interesting things that he sees on inspection, and we'll be sure to drop the Instagram link in our show notes as well.
Yeah, perfect. And there's going to be a training soon also for real estate brokers, investors.
Great. Okay,
Yeah.
some education coming
Thank
up.
you.
All right, Ralph. Well,
All
thank you
right.
so much.
Take care.
Bye
Talk
bye.
to you soon.